Hey everyone, Alex back again with another video. I know, you're not used to this angle, you're used to seeing my shorts and what have you, but I figured this particular topic will need a bit of a longer video because we hit a milestone in with last month's reading. We finally read 30 Stephen King books, so I'm going to use this opportunity to sit down, rank them all for you, sort of give my thoughts on the 30 Stephen King books I've read. Yeah, let's get into this. Let's see what we've read because we're a minute in already and I haven't talked about anything. So the first one is actually a short story. I've got to show this because it's the only way I have the book I'm going to talk about, which is Rage. I don't own a loose copy of that book, so here is my Bachman books collection. The only Bachman book, one of the Bachman books that I've read. I think there's 7 books in total he's written under the pseudonym of Richard Bachman. I didn't like it. I know it's only 133 pages or so, 132 pages, something like that. But it took me what felt like so long to get through it. You can tell it wasn't written by a mature person. You can really tell he wrote this book when he was in his teens, for sure. Yeah, it wasn't for me. 29, Cycle of the Werewolf. Shame to put this one so low because it's actually a somewhat decent werewolf story. It's just really, really short. You can see there, you could probably get through this in a day. And I don't really see this one rank highly on a lot of people's, Stephen King lists. And I sort of see why. Like I said, it's a decent story. With really good illustrations. Just, I kind of wanted it to be a bit longer. I wanted it to do the typical Stephen King thing and just have be strong on the side of character development. But it just was... This one was more story driven, and although it was decent, I can't put it higher just because of how short it was. 28 is From a Buick 8. A lot of people have said that you wouldn't understand this one unless you've read The Dark Tower. This one, I didn't have that issue. I kind of just felt like it sort of, after 5 minutes after reading it, you kind of forget about it. It's one of his shorter ones, again, but it just so forgettable. I just remember how it sort of started really suddenly, ended kind of suddenly, but don't really remember a whole lot about this book. So yeah, that's why it ends up near the bottom end of my list. Number 27, and I had I think I had higher hopes for this one going in because I really wanted this one to be a lot better than what it was, and that's Rose Madder. I really thought that this one was going to be better going in, especially reading those first 200 or so pages. After those, I really thought this book took a massive turn, and it's when it gets to like the supernatural stuff, I thought it went very over the top, and that's a real shame for this because it was heading in a really good direction. I sort of story about a woman running away from her abusive husband, and those parts of the story really intriguing, really interesting, a really good read. But it's the supernatural stuff. It didn't need to go in a supernatural direction. For some reason it went there, and I don't know, for some reason it sort of took away from my reading experience with this one, and I just didn't enjoy it as much as I was hoping to going in. So yeah, number 27 is Rose Madder. 26, this one might come across as controversial, especially because it's one I know some people enjoyed for certain aspects, but that's Holly. Now don't get me wrong, I loved the storyline and the villains in this one. Just the over mention of COVID and the Trump slandering is a bit much in this. Like if you took all that stuff out, this book would probably, I reckon this book would roughly be about 100 to 150 pages shorter. Now, obviously, this book came out in 2023, so COVID was very much over, done with at that point. And we already know how Stephen King feels about Donald Trump, so this book really isn't going to age well. This one would probably be a lot higher on my list. It's just a shame that that stuff overshadows the actual main story of this one, and yeah, it just places a lot lower on my list than maybe other people would put it. But for me, I didn't really care too much for all the COVID stuff. 25? Yep, that's later. The only reason I put this one above Holly is just because of the overall reading experience. It's short, it's got a young kid who can see dead people, and we've definitely seen that trope done before. Very much reads like The Sixth Sense. If you've ever seen that movie, you know what I'm talking about. His power is used in a way to solve a crime, because the dead people also cannot lie to him. So there's that going for it, but it wasn't very good. I wanted it to be a lot better than what it was. Like I said, it was okay, very middle of the road Stephen King. Number 24, Never Flinch. The next book in the Holly Gibney series after Holly. Yes, I preferred this one. Again, because there's no mention of the stuff I previously talked about in Holly. There's no over mention of any of that stuff. You can tell that this book went through quite a few rewrites. I mean, Stephen King himself even said that this book went through a few rewrites, and it's evident. But again, I enjoyed the story, enjoyed seeing Holly Gibney and her whole crew back in action again. But I definitely preferred the villains much more in the previous book than I did to this one. The only reason it places higher is just because my overall reading experience of this one the first time around was a lot better than what it was in the previous book. 23 is Cujo. This one, again, really enjoyed it. This is my first Stephen King book. Very, very quick read. Obviously, Rabid Dog, Saint Bernard. Good novel, just not a whole lot to it, and that's pretty much my main thought process going into Cujo. Is I love the book, but there's not a whole lot to it. The ending to that one is action-packed, in my opinion. Number 22. And the only book on this list that I've read twice, and I have a reason for that, and I'll explain that in just a second. It's Gwendy's Button Box, which he co-wrote with Richard Chismar. Now, my first exposure to this novel was through audiobook, and it was at a time when before I realised audiobooks weren't for me. So revisiting this in a physical format was much more entertaining to me. I had a much better time reading this on the second time around. It's a very short read, so yeah, I can get through this one in just a couple of a sitting or two, and yeah, just fun to revisit the whole town of Castle Rock. Which book 21 is End of Watch. This is the third book in the Bill Hodges trilogy. Another one I enjoyed. It's just I don't really remember a whole lot about it until we get to the ending of the novel. Like Rose Madder, introduces a supernatural element to a story that was very much not in a supernatural or heading in a supernatural direction. And it really didn't need to be that way. Although in this case, I enjoyed it a lot more in this than I did in Rose Madder. Like I said, the reason this one's lower on my list is just because I don't exactly remember much of this one until we get to the ending. At number 20 is The Gunslinger, the first book in the Dark Tower series, and the only book, as of when I'm recording this, that I've read of this series. Not necessarily the best introduction to a fantasy series, but it kind of made sense. It's got the best opening line, in my opinion, of all of the Stephen King books I've read. 19 is Carrie. Not the easiest read for those first 100 pages or so. After you get past the cringe fest, because that's what horror is for, is there to make you cringe at certain points. Once you get past that, very good read. Carrying on from the theme of children with like pyrokinetic powers or telekinetic powers. We go to Firestarter next. Again, same trope, action-packed. Just wasn't really feeling this one at the time that I read it. On a reread, it might move up my list, but for now, it's coming in at number 18. If It Bleeds is at number 17. We're going to get up to the novella and short story collections now. This one was good. I liked all 4 stories in here, some more than others. Ironically, the title book, If It Bleeds, was maybe my least favourite just because of how similar it was to The Outsider. See, Mr. Harrigan's Phone is in here, which I had seen the film for that before I read the book. And ironically, I obviously like the book way better than what Netflix done with it. Life of Chuck is also a really good story, which we also got the adaptation for that in 2025. Yeah, very good. Again, just there's details of some of the stories and maybe I don't remember as much, but it was good from what I remember. Next up is You Like It Darker, his most recent short story collection. You can see this one's had some use out of it. I mean, the foiling's gone from the spine and a little bit at the front. This one I enjoyed. There's a lot of stories in here that I thoroughly enjoyed. This was Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream, I think was my favourite in here. Rattlesnakes was really good. The Answer Man was pretty good as well. There's some really good short stories in here. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this one when it came out. I need to go back and maybe reread a couple of these, but from what I remember, there wasn't too many in here that I didn't enjoy. But I kind of go back and forth with that one and this next one, which one I like more, and that's Skeleton Crew. Now this one, I enjoyed it a lot. Like the stuff I liked, like I really liked it. Like some of Stephen King's best writing is in here. You've got the mist, you've got the monkey, you've got, sorry again, trying to flick to the index page so you can, I can remember, see the stories that are in here. The Mist, the Monkey, The Jaunt was a good one. The Wedding Gig was a decent story. Survivor Type was a lot of fun to read. That one was good. Ones in here that I didn't enjoy, I kind of felt like it was some of Stephen King's work. Like there's a couple of poems in here that didn't necessarily need to be in here. But the highs of this one were really high and the lows were really low, which is kind of how I felt about You Like It Darker. So that's why I kind of go back and forth between which of those two I like more. Next is going to be Finders Keepers, book 2 in the Bill Hodges trilogy. Probably the only one in the trilogy that feels like its own standalone novel, because it's separate from the characters we've had in the previous book and the book that follows on, except for obviously Bill Hodges, Jerome, Holly Gibney. Those 3 are very much still prominent in this novel. But no, really enjoyed this one. I think we're starting to get to the books now where I really enjoyed them, and it's really hard to rank some of these because of how I felt about them. But this one was just a very riveting read, and I did not want to put this one down. Up next, Doctor Sleep. Again, another one that I really enjoyed, and I don't know if it's because I read this one immediately after reading The Shining that my experience with this was probably better than most people. Particularly because it's just a fantastic read. Reading about Danny Torrance when he's a lot older in this one. Of course, you have Rose the Hat, who is an incredible villain in this story. I know some people might think this sequel felt a bit forced, but for me, no, this one, it felt perfect for a sequel. Number 12 is The Outsider. This one is Holly Gibney's solo effort, her first book where she's away from the Bill Hodges trilogy, if you will. I actually really enjoyed this one. I thought the villain in this was very good, and it was nice to see Holly Gibney out on her own. I remember the beginning of this one was very action-packed as well, and if you haven't read The Outsider yet, or you're thinking of it, I'd recommend it. Obviously, there are spoilers in this book to the Bill Hodges trilogy. Not too many, mind you, but there are still spoilers to what happens in the Bill Hodges trilogy. Number 11, Mr. Mercedes, the first book in the Bill Hodges trilogy. Loved this one. If I could put this higher, I would. The only reason it isn't is because the other 10 books above it I enjoyed just a little bit more. I mean, this one just, it doesn't let up. It starts off at a very, brutal moment, and it's a very bleak and brutal book. And if you're a fan of that, this one might be for you. And it's definitely one of the books I've read where I was like, Stephen King's going to be one of my favorite authors. If you want to read a Stephen King book, but you're not into horror and you really like thrillers, then definitely check out this one. Kicking off the top 10, Pet Sematary, maybe King's scariest book, for reasons that if you've read it, you know already. Just had a really good time reading this one, enjoyed it. Another shorter one, and I mean, even the book that Stephen King himself didn't want to publish. Number 9, Salem's Lot. Yeah, I'm not particularly happy with this edition of it. It's a very good story again. Number 8 is probably one that a lot of people aren't expecting me to have probably this high on the list, but I had so much fun reading this, and I think it's one of Stephen King's more underrated books in my opinion, and that is Bag of Bones. Again, an early one for me from King. It's slightly longer than some of his other stuff, but just a very, very good story. You've got this writer who has suffered writer's block since the death of his wife, and he escapes to their home by the river to try and come up with a new story while he's having these dreams about a ghost. It is a great story, and was obviously higher on this list until I read other books that pushed it down on the list. But that one's very, very good. If you like ghost stories, for sure, definitely check out Bag of Bones. Good story. Number 7, yes, and the longest book I've ever read. This one I think took me about 4 weeks to finish because of how long it was. That is The Stand by Stephen King. This particular edition is 1,300 pages, just a bit over. I see why people like this. Definitely one of the best books I've ever read. My favourite Stephen King, obviously not, but still a very, very good book. Up next is Misery. This one, again, really enjoyed it. A quick read as well. This one is very different to the previous book, because where The Stand you've got loads of characters to follow. This book you've only got 2. Now you might think that can be boring reading the same 2 characters for the entirety of this book, but no, it keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire time. You follow Paul Sheldon, who's a writer. He is involved in a car accident in the snow, and he's saved by Annie Wilkes, who is supposed to be his #1 fan, and she doesn't let him leave until he writes a book that she is happy with. Now, you do read the part of the book that he's writing, which I don't care too much for, so I think when I visit this book again, I will skip those parts, because again, I didn't really care too much to read the book that the character was writing in the book, but I can see why he's done it, because without those, this book would be, about 150, maybe 200 pages. Top 5 now, and kicking off the top 5 on writing, the only non-fiction book on this list. Half of this is writing tips, half of this is a memoir. It is very good. Again, very, very short, and if you are an aspiring author or you've ever thought about writing a book, this one is a very interesting read. Number 4 is The Dead Zone. This one I kind of feel is one of them books that people either love it or hate it. For me, I loved it. I didn't want to put it down. Johnny Smith. He has an accident when he's younger on an ice rink that kind of gives him these special powers, and then you can watch as he grows older and uses his special powers for not necessarily good, but he thinks he's doing good by his morals. Number 3, seems to be everyone's favourite book, is It. This one I've put at number 3. Again, took me about a month or so to read this one as well, just because of how long it is. But another very, very good story. More a coming of age story with horror elements than an actual horror story itself, I found when reading this. And of course, again, you're following different points of view because you're following all 7 main characters. You follow their different perspectives on this, and you sort of follow their lives as kids and then again as adults, and it's a very, very good coming of age story. There's that scene in this book which we're not going to talk about. If it wasn't for that, this could be potentially number 2 or even number 1, but yeah, number 3 it is for it. Yeah, number 2 is going to be The Shining. This one, I loved it, thought it was a very, very good read. Again, obviously reading it back to back with Dr. Sleep also helped my experience, and of course taking the whole concept of a haunted house, which we've seen thousands of times before, and cranking it up a notch to being an entire hotel. Very, very good story. But coming in at number 1, and maybe my favourite book of all time, is that controversial to say? Probably not. But it's going to be 11/22/63. This, I started reading on my way up to my grand's funeral the night before, and by the time we were on our way back down, I think I was about halfway through it already, and I finished it by the time I got the day after we got back home. It was a very good read. I think about 3 or 4 days I think it took me to get through this. I loved it. I didn't want to put it down. It's a time travel novel. It's historical fiction. There's romance in here. There's just everything in here. This is maybe, in my opinion, the best book I've ever read, and my favorite Stephen King book. In fact, I definitely want to read this one, reread this again soon, because I loved it that much. And of course, you've got a small reference to it in this book as well, which is, I'm not going to spoil if you haven't read it what that reference is, but if you read this one, you'll know what I'm talking about. But yeah, very good story. A bit of a longer one, but much like the rest of these books, I've said it again, if you enjoy it, you'll get through it. As I said, I enjoyed that one so much. I think I got through it in less than a week, which is very rare for me with a book of that length, but hey. Whew, we're finally done. That's all 30 Stephen King books that I've read, ranked from my least favourite to my favourite. I think when we do this again, I'll say a little bit less about each book, because this has dragged on a bit longer than I was originally anticipating. But thank you guys so much for bearing with me on this one. Hope you've enjoyed this. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Please subscribe if you're new here, then you'll see it every time I upload a new video or a new short or whatever it is you guys are interested in. But yeah, anyway, I'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much.